I'll just start by saying greetings. I'm glad we're having our Thursday night class, Heart of Freedom, that Doug Pullin usually does, and I feel honored to have been invited to offer the Dharma to you and share our time together. And some of you I know, and some of you I don't know. I'm very happy to see you and be here. One of the things I thought I would talk about tonight, we could all talk about, is joy. And one of the things that we did when we showed the movie Mission Joy at PIMC last month was to start out at the beginning and just do a little internal sliding scale, like when you go to the doctor and they ask you your pain level, is it 1 to 10? Usually they make you circle something or fill in a blank. So just take a moment to take a breath and then just find out how it feels inside of what do you think your level of joy. Now it's interesting to define what we think of as joy. It might be a subtle happiness, or it might be something that's been exciting that's happened, or maybe it's just a certain calmness. But just take a mental picture inside of what you think your joy level is right now. And then I'm going to have us share with each other at least 2 things that come to mind that make you happy or have brought you joy recently, something that you can think of right now, maybe over the course of your day, that was a good part of your day. So when we share, if you feel like sharing, just say the number that you felt on your scale. And then as you think now about something that may have been joyous, when you unmute to say that, if you would give your name. I know everybody, maybe I'm the only one that doesn't know everybody, and I can see that. So, but then just mention what a couple of those things are for you that you can recall that have brought joy. So let's take a minute and see who feels like they want to share anything. I'll see what I can come up with and share if nobody wants to go first.
Kendall, I'll share. This is Catherine. Hi.
Hi.
It was interesting. Maybe joy is like a sliding scale. I wasn't feeling particularly happy or joyful today, but just being here with the group, I was like, I felt this instant lightheartedness. And so I think it feels like maybe even up around a 6, happiness or joyful. Yeah. But it's like, oh, joy can sort of come and go. It changes too. Mm-hmm. But I just, I'm very grateful for people showing up. This is, I like, brings joy to my life.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much. Anybody else feel like going? Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not Sheila. My name is Doug. My wife's name is Sheila. When you asked us to do the scale, it was like 3. And then as I thought about it, it began to sort of move up. But I wanted to share a spiritual practice that I've been doing lately that's been bringing a lot of joy. My wife and I signed up for something called Adopt a Block, which I don't know if you know what that is, but you sign up online and they send you a long grabber to pick up trash in your neighborhood, and they send you gloves and a bucket, and we've been doing that probably for over a year. And just this morning, we've expanded beyond our block, and there's a half a block from Columbia Park. So we do our block and then we circle around Columbia Park and we meet people and their dogs and the cool air in the morning. And people are very appreciative of, oh, thank you for cleaning up. And when Sheila and I finish, I walk over to the coffee shop picking up trash, and the people at the coffee shop know me, and most of the time they give me free coffee. Yay. And it's just a great community building, something to do, for your community, and just brings me a lot of joy.
Thank you. And did your joy scale go up after you thought about that? Like if you said now, would it be different?
Just talking about it, just brings a smile to my face.
Uplifts the heart. Thank you, Doug. Nice to see you. Maggie?
Hi. Well, I would say probably between a 7 and an 8 today. And one of the moments where I experienced joy was looking at my laptop this morning and seeing that candle was leading Doug's Sangha. I said, oh, I'm joyful. And just, I grew for the first time this year lemon cucumbers. Well, I mean, I personally did, they grew. And biting into one, I was making salad for lunch and I was slicing it and then putting it in my salad. And then when I actually bit into it, it was luscious. I mean, they're lemon cucumbers. I'm not a big cucumber fan, but they're like sunshine. And the other thing that made me joyous today is tomorrow's my partner's birthday. And I found, we don't really do gifts right now because of finances, but I found like the perfect gift. I got 2 tickets to see a tribute to George Harrison at Revolution Hall in October. And I'm like, yes. So that gave me great joy. Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie. Great to see you as always. Anyone else feel like sharing their joy scale or something that they thought of? I can go. I was on your team, Doug. I think I was at about a 3. My general joy level, while I think about it and encourage it a lot, the reality of it is I'm probably between a 3 and a 4 most of the time because I tend to be a very observant and what I would then call a sometimes aversive or critical, minded person. So that tends to make the mind a little bit curmudgeon-y. And so, but today when I was working, this is my library and my meditation room and my massage treatment room. And today when I was working, I was looking around the room. So I think I'll show you what brought me joy today. I'll bring over 2 things. One is in my massage practice today, I had someone who was having a very difficult time. And so I keep Sukanat is her name, Suki. And Suki is Sukha is happiness in Pali, but if you recall in the old days, um, there was a different kind of sugar called sucanat. I don't know if anybody ever knew about sucanat. It's probably not so out there in the public anymore. So because she could look like brown sugar, we called her sucanat, and Suki for short. So anyway, she becomes a very cuddling thing for people who sometimes have challenges during their body work sessions. And she was somebody's cuddler today. And so it made me happy that that was an ability to bring some relief for someone. And on the more calm joy scale is one of my favorite statues of the Buddha, because he has a very calm, tranquil, and really joyous, the true joy of enlightenment on his face. So we have from childlike joy to tranquility joy. So I definitely, as I thought about those things, went from a 3 to a 7 or 8. So that's my joy report for today. Anybody else have something they might have noticed or want to share before we go into our sitting practice? There will be more time later. Never fear. If you're shy now, you might feel like sharing later, but of course there's absolutely no obligation. It's always nice to have community feeling of hearing each other's voices, so it's not just me talking out loud to myself and you. But let's have some time, unless anybody else has one more thing they'd like to share in a little check-in right now. And if not, we'll do some sitting. We'll have a little more check-in later. It's different for me to run a class for an hour and a half, because I usually do it for 2 hours, because I like to have a nice long sitting period as well as Dhamma discussion. So we'll see how I do in a timely manner. I will try, I promise. So let's start with the ringing of the bell. Calling ourselves to our familiar sitting place. Be however you can be comfortable, as long as you can hear my bell. Go any place in your room that you want to sit. Turn yourself away from the camera, however you feel comfortable. Letting the sound of the Dharma bell come to our ears as we assume our position that we've probably assumed hundreds and hundreds of times before, but it's always different in this moment. And as we begin, it gives us a sense of containment by paying homage to the Buddha, to the Dhamma and the Sangha, to the possibility of enlightenment in this lifetime as was shown to us by the Buddha. As he found out for himself without having any teachers, he exhausted all the teachers around him in his time and saw for himself. And through the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, siphoned them out enough for them to be understandable for us in what he considered a small handful of leaves. And paying homage and having gratitude for all of the sanghas who have gone before us, monks and nuns and lay people that remembered the words of the Buddha at his time, and 100+ years later began writing it down, and it made it through so many thousands of years. Really, that's a long time, 2,600 years. It's gone through many countries and had different definitions of the teachings, but it all centers around the Four Noble Truths. And so as we sit, we can see for ourselves, just connecting with the rising and the falling of the breath. Or we may notice sound coming to the ears. We can notice touch of our buttocks on the cushion or the chair, our arms or hands touching our body or touching each other. Really brings us into this present moment. And as we settle, bringing the heart, the mind, the body together in one place, we can begin to settle the body. Letting a sense of relaxation flow as we sit behind our eyes, around our jaw and face. Maybe noticing if any of our conversation has lightened the heart a little. There might be an internal smile that we have for sharing or thinking about some way that joy has arisen. And we stay open as this relaxation flows around our neck and shoulders, releasing and relaxing, flowing through the body, feeling the weight of the buttocks on the chair, gravity holding this container of our body. As we may remember, the Buddha touched the earth to declare his claim and rightful claim to be free. He was connected with the earth. It's been an embodied practice. And sometimes it's hard to stay attentive to the body if we've had traumatic experiences in the past related to our bodies. We can also stay with that touch point of the buttocks on the cushion or the feet on the floor, or where the hands touch each other. Might be a little more external to the body at first, but it's noticing the body, noticing pressure or heat. There might be warmth or coolness. If we choose to focus on the breath as our single object, we may notice if it's a long breath or a short breath. We may notice if it's jagged or smooth. We're just being present with a single object of the breath or a touch point or hearing occurring at the ears. To let our bodies settle, to allow our hearts and minds to relax just a little bit more. Using the breath or the touch point of the buttocks or the hands. Maybe we feel the breath still at a single point at the nostrils, or pressure and release of pressure at the belly. We can also feel the breath sometimes throughout the whole body, like the container of our body as breathing. Wherever we are, we can always use this place to come back to. When we find our mind wandering, as it so often does, we can gently bring it back to this single point. We may notice that the quality of our breath changes as time goes by. Sometimes we lose track of it altogether, which is fine. We can sometimes find ourselves in a more open, spacious area of whatever comes into our awareness is what is present, and mindfulness is there, awareness is there. We're just not so single-pointed on the breath anymore. It's a broader field of awareness. So whatever works for you and whatever you're used to in your practice, returning again to the present moment with whatever's happening, without judgment, gently holding yourself in kindness and appreciation for being here right now. Some of the subtle joys that come to us in the practice is when we wake up in this moment. We might be thinking about the future or the past, or maybe a little confused off into a state of sort of semi-sleepiness, or maybe there's anxiety in the mind. We just happens. Conditions come together and we have just enough effort to wake up now at this moment, wherever we are. And waking up in this moment and being with it and realizing, oh, this is pleasant or this is unpleasant, and keeping our observation of it simple without a long storyline. Realizing that awareness is there and wisdom has arisen. And that can bring a very subtle joy, the kind of joy that nurtures us, that we can be reminded of when we're not particularly feeling that joy. We can put a little extra mudita joy in our storage banks. Each time we wake up, it's a moment of awakening. It's a moment of being in the present. When the mind wanders or we forget where we are, we can just begin again or wake up in that moment and notice. Pleasant, unpleasant, can't really tell, neutral. Or we go back to that single object. Whatever we can notice and sustain our attention on, so that we begin to really see the true nature of what happens when we do more than just notice and be with things as they arise and pass away. If we tend to cling to them, want them to be different than the way they are, then we may notice that the mind has subtle or not so subtle tension in it from grasping, which is a subtle sense of suffering. We just want to keep letting go, to be present, just enough effort to be aware and interested. Developing moment to moment mindfulness of moments strung together. Continuity of practice. Sometimes it's helpful to ask ourselves, what is the attitude of the mind right now? Without judgment about what we think it should be. We're just being aware. What is the attitude of the mind? Do we need to bring it a little more energy or interest to notice if we have skillful or unskillful thoughts that may arise? If they seem to be unskillful or not particularly useful for us, or maybe even negative, can we let them go? Can we use renunciation for just letting them go and inclining the heart and mind toward skillful thinking and feeling, having loving kindness for ourselves, having goodwill for ourselves, appreciation, noticing these thoughts of goodwill and kindness perhaps to others. We can encourage and incline the mind toward more wholesome thinking. The mind just carries on all kinds of thoughts. We don't have to attach to any of them. But sometimes we're in a little rut around some of them, and we can just give them a soft, gentle note because we've maybe heard them before, and then just let them go and come back to that place of the breath or the touch point or the body as the vessel of the breath to see what's there now with mindfulness and awareness. what is happening now? What is the attitude of the heart and mind? Our attention may be drawn to the body. There may be some tension or an ache somewhere from having sat still. We can notice that. Let this feeling of kindness hold ourselves gently with compassion. And we can notice if we're noticing something in the body, before just dismissing it or moving, we may investigate it a little further. Is it warm or cool, stabbing, shaking? You can come up with your own adjectives, or not even putting words to it, but having presence with it. Noticing the impulse to want to move, the intention of wanting something to change. Noticing the discomfort that may be there and the desire, the craving to change it. We may stick with it a little bit longer and notice that it does in fact change somehow on its own accord. Conditions have come together for a certain amount of time and then they fall apart. They dissipate. And if we don't cling or grasp to them, we may not cause ourselves that kind of internal suffering around it if we just keep letting go. As Ajahn Chah says, if you let go a little, you get a little peace. If you let go a lot, you get a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you have complete peace. Those are kind of high standards, but nonetheless, we can use them as our roadmap. And as we notice this feeling in the heart and in the mind, holding ourselves gently, we can be reminded of something that we think brought us joy, that feeling of joy in our hearts, whether it be subtle or whether it be more than that. Holding ourselves gently, suggesting, as in the Brahma Vihara of Mudita, sympathetic joy, we can say to ourselves, may I continue to enjoy this happiness. Or you can notice that feeling in the heart and mind. May I continue to enjoy this happiness. And sometimes that's hard if we haven't come upon something that makes us feel very happy. We can find another being in our circle, a Dharma teacher, a benefactor of some kind, a friend, bringing this friend to mind. Getting a felt sense of them. Knowing that they've had moments of happiness. Maybe you can think of one. And if not, we just have this feeling of our friend or benefactor within our hearts. May you continue to enjoy your happiness. Or, I'm happy for your happiness. We can receive sympathetic joy from another's, from another's joy. We can receive that joy. There might be someone that just came right into your heart when you're thinking of another person who shared something joyful with you recently, or you may know about something. Just holding that person. I am happy for your happiness. I am happy for your success. May you continue to enjoy your happiness or your success. And including another person in our heart, in our mind. Bringing them to the mind's eye, or perhaps you have a felt sense of who they are when you saw them recently, or talked to them, or felt their presence. Another friend or a benefactor. Seeing this person joyous, remembering something about them. I'm happy for your happiness. May you continue to enjoy your happiness. And letting this unconditional sense of joy include someone you don't know or you don't know very well, someone you may have seen recently with a big smile on their face, or knowing that they're enjoying some happiness, but they are not directly related to you. You don't know them well. But just as these others, we've shared their happiness, may we envision a neutral person that we perhaps saw recently. Envisioning their happiness, being with them. May you continue to enjoy your happiness. I'm happy for your happiness. And as we have a sense of fullness, holding ourselves and the others of our benefactor and friends and the neutral person in our hearts, wishing for the continuation of happiness. I'd like to share a poem from a novice nun in Fukui, Japan. This was in 1985. The ordination name is Jina, which is loving kindness, and she joined the Plum Village community in 1990 as one of the European monastic disciples. Sister Chandyu Nyagyam. Moments of Joy. She's got a book, The Poetry of Sister Gina Chandyu Nyingyam. This morning, the wind carried away all the white plum blossoms, revealing tender green leaves. Lying down to nap, high up on the mountain, a young pine offers her shade. A gentle breeze, a lullaby. The sound of the rain on my window turns my little cottage into a cozy refuge. This morning, among the red tulips, 2 bright yellow dandelions, not intimidated at all. This morning, it looks so quiet outside. I open my window to hear the silence better. In the blue sky, one lone little white cloud drifts leisurely, nowhere to go, nothing to do. And as I ring the bell, letting that sound come to the ears, may we have gratitude and understanding that the goodness of our practice benefits all sentient beings, which can bring us great joy. This generosity of ours in giving ourselves to this moment of training the mind to be able to see suffering clearer and to be able to understand directly the release from suffering. Anicca vata sankhara upadavaya domino upakitawa meruchanti te samvapasamo sukho. All conditioned things are subject to impermanence. And seeing this clearly with mindfulness brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. Thank you for your practice. It brings me great joy. Mudita. So I thought before we opened this up for further conversation, I would try to condense some of my notes on joy to see what I can come up with for 15 or 20 minutes. We'll see. There's lots more than that, and there can also be less. But it's interesting thinking about having joy for another person's happiness. I mean, one of the most important teachings of the Buddha around joyfulness is that joy isn't dependent upon having ideal or perfect conditions. But joyfulness is a quality that is inwardly born and generated and possible in all moments. So the Buddha speaks about joyfulness in these different ways, like there's a kind of the joy of the senses, sensual joyfulness, and non-sensual joyfulness, or what he calls worldly and unworldly. And thinking sometimes about the joy of the senses, the world of the senses, it would be, a very unhappy, difficult place to live in without art and music and poetry and literature. There's joyfulness that we find in our connections with the natural world and with those that we care about. Joyfulness in the world of the senses points to qualities of wholeheartedness and being present and being able to listen, being able to be attuned and gladdened and uplifted. So it's not something to be dismissed or seen as somehow being unspiritual or unworthy. But the Buddha also speaks very much about a non-sensual joyousness, not dependent on the senses. And here the Buddha is pointing to the capacity that we have to cultivate the sources or the roots of joyfulness within our own being. And there's different aspects of this. One of them is the meditative practice of cultivating inward collectedness, gatheredness or stillness, single pointedness, that place of concentration when we're attending to the single object like the breath. That's a home of joy. And another aspect is cultivating our capabilities for generosity and care, and beginning to notice how they have a taste of joyfulness and happiness. Metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion. The words spoken at the time of the Buddha, metta and karuna. This kind of goodwill and kindness and compassion. And we live in a culture where there's often, sort of a joy deficit. We certainly have seen that over the last several years with all the challenges with the pandemic and everything that's dominoed from there, the challenges of children not having been in school for so long, the challenges of people changing their jobs. And it's really easy for our mind to highlight what's wrong or broken or imperfect. And, this doesn't mean that everything is perfect and that everything is all well in the world. There's a whole lot that's very unacceptable. But we see how often we walk into a room or a situation and see another person or look at ourselves and tend to highlight what we notice in our attention is, something that needs improvement or needs to be gotten rid of, or it's flawed, or it's imperfect. The cultivation of joyousness, on the other hand, teaches us a great deal about coexistence, living together. And yes, there's affliction, and there are things that are broken, and there are those things that are heartbreaking in life. It lives side by side with those things that are well, or that which can be celebrated and appreciated. And really, more than any other religion, Buddhism is associated with happiness. According to Buddhist thinking, happiness and sorrow are our own responsibility and completely within our control. Buddhists say everything comes from the mind. And you'll find joy in a lot of places in the Buddhist teachings. It's one of the 7 factors of enlightenment, of awakening, the 7 capacities that are valued as part of the practice that's known as inner wealth. These factors you might already know of investigation. I mean, you'll recognize them from what we do in our sitting practice. Investigation, energy, joy, mindfulness, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And they might seem sort of disconnected from ordinary life, but they're actually the developed forms of mental qualities used regularly in the midst of everyday activities. So sometimes I think of ways of nurturing joy, of mudita, delighting in the happiness of others, by imagining maybe that I've just received some really good news. And what's one of my very first thoughts? If I think about who I might call to share my joy with, knowing that another person might be happy for my happiness, and it kind of makes my happiness sometimes feel greater or more real. There's a German proverb, shared pain is half the pain, and shared joy is twice the joy. So when we share our joy, it doubles for us. And we also give happiness to another person. So it's sort of a win-win situation. That's one of the reasons why if you have the opportunity to give dana to a teacher or an organization, if you can, or when you're at a retreat, if you can give the dana directly, you receive the happiness of the person receiving it. So there's twice the joy. And so how can we actually invite more joys into our lives? In the Buddha's teaching, sympathetic joy, or being happy for another's happiness, it's one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, those highest qualities of the heart. Loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, those receive sometimes quite a lot of attention from practitioners and researchers and the press. But sympathetic joy doesn't get as much attention. Sometimes I wonder, how can that be? Really, shouldn't joy be the most appealing of the heart qualities? Not necessarily. Traditionally, it's often referred to as the most difficult of the 4, because sympathetic joy can be complicated. You know, haven't we sometimes had the unpleasant feeling of not being able to fully enjoy the happiness or the success of a family member or a colleague? There's that little niggling voice sometimes. Why did they get that great trip and why didn't I? Or why is that person being praised over the moon in front of a whole bunch of people and not me? You know, we're good people, so we sometimes feel ashamed of our feelings, and maybe we sort of feign happiness a little bit. You know, like, honestly, I'm really happy for you, when you're not really feeling it that way. So sometimes we're not always eager to deal with sympathetic joy. Why is being happy for another sometimes challenging? It could be that we feel we're already somehow missing out a little bit on life. So if someone else has good news, we might sort of reflectively compare ourselves to them and feel envious, no matter how sincere our intentions are. And our feelings are often based on the belief that there's only a limited amount of happiness to go around. And so therefore, when something good happens to another person, well, that's like sort of less for us. And this argument, of course, doesn't have any rational foundation. It is surprisingly persistent. How can we invite more joy into our lives? It's important to remember that we can't make ourselves feel joy. We can't really make ourselves feel joy, but we can set the intention to be more open to joy and to cultivate it through repeated and patient practices. One of the things that the Buddha suggests sometimes is, well, you know how in the practice of loving kindness, we begin with ourselves. In the practice of joy, we also begin with ourselves. And if it's challenging to jump straight into that joy, we can begin with just perceiving what's there and what's not there, and then gradually move on to appreciation and joy. It's hard to admit sometimes for ourselves that we have good qualities. But the Buddha suggested that we recall our own good deeds, that we recall our own good qualities. We learn to appreciate our own strengths and our kindnesses and generous actions. And these don't need to be big. They might seem like nothing special when we encourage or support someone in a difficult situation. It can become a source of joy if we let ourselves become aware of the goodness of our actions and feel that awareness in our body. The other day, I got a call from one of the Sangha members at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I knew something was going on. And it turned out that that person had to go to the emergency room at Providence in Milwaukee and had their roommate with them for a while, and I just asked, well, who knows how long you're going to be there? Do you need somebody to replace? And, give me an hour, I'll make you some steamed rice and vegetables and bring some food over for you by the time they're done doing all the tests they're going to do. Unless you have to go to emergency surgery, you'll be starving and you'll want to eat, and, I'll relieve your housemate. So instead of going to bed like I thought I was going to do, I got some of the leftovers out of the refrigerator, made some stir-fried rice, added some vegetables, some stuff that would make them feel good, and went over to ER to be with him. They let me in the ER, but they would never let me into the actual room because they were doing the tests. So I knew that my food probably paid off. And sure enough, they came walking out of the emergency room saying they could go home. And we just sat down in the darkened corner of the waiting room where there actually was one, and shared the food I brought for him and had conversation about how the visit went, and, did they feel calm enough to go home all right, and just kind of unpacked what was going on. And I thought at the time, I need to remember this so that I can rejoice in some of my moments of happiness. Because when it comes time and I'm sitting and I go, how, what have I done for others lately? I have a hard time remembering what those are. We all do. And so I tried to embed it in my mind. Okay, this is something to remember when I want to remember some of my own good deeds, because it enlightens the heart and mind, our own good deeds. And after we experience joy for ourselves, then we can begin connecting with other people's joy and allowing ourselves to really feel it. Maybe we want to use the silent wish or the blessing phrase, like, may your happiness and good fortune grow and never leave, or I'm happy for your happiness, or may you continue to have happiness. And so that's why we invite joy for the happiness of a friend or a loved one or a teacher or someone we really love. And for most of us, it's usually fairly easy to feel sympathetic joy for our inner circle. If a child has success in school, that makes us happy, or someone else's child, maybe not so much. So there's nothing wrong with rejoicing in the good fortune of our loved ones. But we limit ourselves if our joy ends there. So we move on to invite joy for somebody we don't really know. And then eventually we can expand the circle to somebody that we might find challenging. And the expanding of this joy can be done, either in formal meditation like we did a little bit tonight, or it can happen during the day as we think about people or even encounter them in person. And we have to be gentle and patient with ourselves, because this practice often feels a little unfamiliar in the beginning. Some of the ways that we can remind ourselves is to express gratitude. Whether we're approaching other people or our pets or moments or memories, we can feel grounded and joyful when we express our gratitude to ourselves and to others. And we can also sometimes shift our perspective when we take a moment to look at a situation from a different point of view. We can often see the bigger picture and expand our perspectives and learn from there. And it's been shown again and again that the single most important predictor of mental and physical health is the amount and the quality of our relationships. And that loss that we felt so much, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, I know I have really seen how connections are so life-affirming. And it's always important to be kind. Kindness and connection go together. And so when we're offering kindness, we're reaching out to another to ease their pain and lend a hand and share our love and, show that we care. And we can start that with remembering our acts of kindness, remembering our good deeds, remembering good deeds that others have brought to us, so that we have these ways of making these new pathways in our hearts and minds to really have this sense of joy be important to nurture. One of the quotes from the Dhammapada chapter on happiness: "Let us live in joy, not hating those who hate. Amongst those who hate us, we live free of hate. Let us live in joy, free from disease among those who are diseased. Among those who are diseased, let us live free of disease. Let us live in joy, free from greed among the greedy. Among those who are greedy, we live free of greed. Craving is the worst disease. Disharmony is the greatest sorrow. The one who knows this truly knows that freedom is the highest bliss." So that's probably close enough for me to have this conversation with myself. The other place that we can really feel joy and encouragement is from elders who have walked the path before us. And they're the examples that it's possible to be free of greed and hatred and delusion, and constantly giving with incredible love. So as we follow the Buddha's instructions, the path is beautiful as we go. We can see changes in ourselves, and we can see how much it matters to the people around us. One of the sayings that I love is, "The Dhamma is beautiful at the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful at the end." So with that, I will stop listening to myself talk mindfully as I talked, and ask if any of you have a little response, reflection, something you feel like sharing before I come up with a few announcements. And I will put the link, let me see if I have it, here it is, let's see if this copies, for the Donna Bowl for Thursdays. I don't know, some of you give in various ways, I'm sure. Maybe you do it monthly, and maybe you just do it from time to time. But I will put it over here because these teachings are always given freely, and we support each other on this path. So just your generosity of being here over and over, as you do perhaps on a regular basis, is greatly appreciated. So let me hear from you if there's anything you'd like to say. And then I'll make a couple more announcements about classes.